A gift under alien skies. Noah's boots crunched against the dry, crimson soil as he moved cautiously through the strange landscape. The twin suns overhead cast long shadows across the alien terrain, painting the jagged rocks in hues of deep orange and violet. He had been stranded on this planet for 3 weeks now. His ship, what was left of it, lay in ruins behind him, its communication systems fried beyond repair. The emergency beacon still blinked weakly, but he had no way of knowing if anyone out there could see it. Or if they even cared. Noah let out a slow breath. Surviving wasn't the problem. He had found edible plants, clean water, and even shelter in a cave not far from here. The real problem was them. The natives. At first, he had only seen them from a distance, tall, humanoid figures with luminous silver eyes and shimmering, almost iridescent skin. They moved like whispers through the land, never making a sound, watching him from the shadows. They never approached. Never spoke. Until today. Noah could feel someone watching him now, hidden just beyond the cluster of twisted, crystalline trees ahead. His muscles tensed. He wasn't sure if they were hostile or simply cautious. But he was about to find out. Slowly, he reached into the pocket of his torn flight suit and pulled out a small, wrapped object. A piece of chocolate. The last one he had. He had no idea if they would recognize it as food, but it was the only offering he could think of. Something simple. Something human. "Hey," he called out, his voice calm but firm. "I know you're there." Silence. Then, movement. A figure stepped out from behind the trees. She was unlike anything he had ever seen. Tall and elegant, with pale blue skin that seemed to glow under the sunlight. Her long, silver-white hair cascaded down her back in delicate braids, and her eyes, large and impossibly bright, studied him with an intensity that made his breath hitch. She was beautiful. And she was wary. Noah slowly extended his hand, palm up, revealing the small, wrapped treat. "It's a gift," he said, trying to keep his tone light. "Something from my world." The alien girl, young, but with an air of quiet wisdom, tilted her head slightly, her gaze flicking between his face and the object in his palm. Then, after a long moment, she stepped forward. Noah held still as she reached out, her fingers brushing against his as she took the chocolate. Her touch was cool, almost electric, sending a strange shiver up his arm. She unwrapped it carefully, as if the delicate silver foil was as precious as the gift itself. And then, to his surprise, she lifted the chocolate to her lips and took a small bite. Her reaction was immediate. Her eyes widened, her posture stiffening as if she had been struck by lightning. Her entire body seemed to tremble as she let out a soft, sharp breath. Noah took a step back, alarmed. Are you okay?" For a moment, she didn't respond. She just stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then she did something that sent a chill down his spine. She dropped to one knee. Head bowed. One fist placed over her heart. As if he had just done something sacred. Noah blinked. "Wait, what are you?" Before he could finish, another figure appeared from the trees. Then another. And another. A dozen of them. All watching. And one by one, they followed her lead. Kneeling before him. Noah's heart pounded. What had he just done? The meaning behind the gesture. Noah's pulse pounded in his ears as he stood frozen, staring at the group of aliens kneeling before him. This wasn't the reaction he had expected. Fear. Maybe. Curiosity. Sure. But this? The silver-eyed girl, the one he had given the chocolate to, remained motionless, her head bowed, fist pressed against her chest. Her pale blue skin shimmered slightly in the light of the twin suns. Noah swallowed hard. You don't have to do that," he said awkwardly, raising his hands in a placating gesture. "It was just a gift." She lifted her head slightly, her eyes locking onto his with a sharp intensity. "You do not understand what you have done, human." Her voice was soft but carried weight, like a quiet storm on the horizon. His breath caught. Her words were clear, too clear. How did she know his language? Before he could ask, she stood, her movements fluid and precise. The others followed suit, their luminous gazes fixed on him with a mixture of awe and something else. Something that sent a cold shiver down his spine. "What did I do?" Noah asked carefully. The girl hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward, closing the space between them. She was taller than him by at least a few inches, her presence both commanding and unnerving. "I am Lyrian," she said at last. "Daughter of the High Matriarch of the Ilari." He blinked. Ilari. So that was the name of her people. Lyrian continued. "You have given me a gift. In my culture, such an act is not casual." Noah shifted uncomfortably. It was just a piece of chocolate. Her expression didn't change. And yet, it was an offering given freely, without expectation. Her words sent a prickle of unease through him. "So, what does that mean exactly?" She hesitated, glancing back at the others before looking at him again. "It means you have chosen me." Noah's stomach dropped. "Wait. What?" "It is an ancient custom," she explained. "To give a gift without demand is to acknowledge a bond. A connection. Among my people, such a gesture carries great weight." He exhaled sharply. "Okay, but I didn't mean to." "Intention does not change what has been set in motion," she interrupted. Noah rubbed his temples. This was bad. Really bad. "So what happens now?" he asked cautiously. Lyrian studied him for a long moment. Then, before he could react, she turned and began walking away. The others parted, giving her space as she moved through them like a queen among warriors. She only paused once, to glance over her shoulder at him. "Come," she said simply. And just like that, Noah realized he didn't have a choice. He followed them through the rocky terrain, his heart hammering with every step. The sun beat down on him, the heat relentless, but he barely noticed. His mind was too busy racing through every possible scenario. He had no weapons. No way to call for help. And now he was being led straight into what he assumed was their city, if they even had cities. Lyrian walked ahead of him, her back straight, posture regal. The others flanked them, silent and watchful. "So where exactly are we going?" he asked. "To the Citadel," she answered without looking back. "Great." That didn't sound ominous at all. After nearly an hour of walking, the jagged landscape began to shift. The ground beneath them smoothed out into what looked like polished stone, dark and almost glass-like. And then he saw it. Rising from the horizon like a monolithic fortress, the citadel loomed before them, its towering spires glistening under the sun. Noah let out a low whistle. "That's a lot bigger than I expected." Lyrian finally turned to face him fully. "This is where our leaders reside. Where all major decisions are made." He raised an eyebrow. "So you're taking me straight to your leaders?" Her gaze didn't waver. "You have forced my hand. This is not a matter I can handle alone." Noah exhaled. He wasn't sure if that was good news or bad news. As they entered the citadel, the air grew noticeably cooler. The interior was vast, the walls lined with intricate carvings that seemed to shimmer with a faint, ethereal glow. Other Ilari watched their approach, their eyes filled with curiosity, and something else. Something more guarded. Finally, they reached what looked like a grand hall. At the far end stood a tall, imposing figure. Her features were sharp, elegant, and unmistakably similar to Lyrian's. But where Lyrian's expression was controlled, this woman's gaze was piercing. Noah didn't need to be told who she was. The High Matriarch. Lyrian stepped forward and bowed her head slightly. "Mother." The matriarch's eyes flicked toward Noah, assessing him with a look that made his skin crawl. This is the human, her voice was calm but carried the weight of authority. Lyrian nodded. He is. The matriarch's gaze sharpened. And he has given you a gift. Lyrian hesitated, then nodded again. A heavy silence settled over the room. Then, without warning, the matriarch's expression darkened. Then he must prove himself. Noah's stomach clenched. Prove myself? The matriarch stepped down from her elevated position, approaching him slowly. Our traditions cannot be taken lightly, she said. You have unknowingly bound yourself to my daughter through an act of goodwill. But goodwill alone is not enough. Noah clenched his fists. I didn't mean to. She held up a hand, silencing him. Meaning is irrelevant, she said coldly. What matters is action. Noah swallowed hard. So what exactly do I have to do? The matriarch tilted her head slightly, as if considering him. Then she spoke the words that made his blood run cold. You must prove that you are worthy of the bond. Noah's heart pounded. And if I can't? The matriarch's expression was unreadable. Then you will not leave this place alive. The trial of worth. Noah felt his blood turn to ice. The matriarch's words echoed in his head, prove your worth, or you will not leave this place alive. He had expected confusion, maybe even anger from the aliens, but this? He glanced at Lyrian, hoping for some kind of intervention, but her face was unreadable. She merely stood there, her silver eyes fixed on the matriarch, her posture rigid. What, exactly do you mean by, prove my worth? Noah asked carefully, forcing his voice to stay steady. The matriarch's gaze bore into him like a blade. Ilari customs are sacred. When one offers a gift in such a manner, they declare their willingness to form a bond, a connection that is not to be taken lightly. Noah clenched his jaw. But I didn't know that. Where I come from, giving gifts is just, normal. It doesn't mean anything. The matriarch's eyes flashed with something he couldn't decipher. Ignorance does not absolve you of responsibility. His frustration flared. So what happens now? You want me to, what, marry Lyrian? He meant it as a joke, but the moment the words left his mouth, the tension in the room thickened. Some of the armored Ilari shifted uncomfortably. Others stared at him with unreadable expressions. Lyrian's face remained a mask of control, but there was something in her eyes, something tight. The matriarch let the silence drag before finally speaking again. The bond is not merely a marriage, human. It is a unity of soul and purpose. Among our people, such a connection is sacred and must be earned. Noah exhaled. Okay, so what do I have to do? The matriarch's lips pressed into a thin line. You will face the trial. A murmur rippled through the gathered Ilari. Noah frowned. What kind of trial? The matriarch raised a single hand, and the hall fell into complete silence. Then she spoke, her voice like stone. You will face 3 challenges, tests of strength, cunning, and spirit. Noah swallowed. And if I fail? The matriarch didn't hesitate. Then you will perish. The first challenge, strength. Noah stood in a vast circular arena, the walls impossibly high, the floor smooth black stone. A faint hum vibrated beneath his feet, like an ancient power thrumming beneath the surface. Hundreds of Ilari filled the viewing platforms above, their silver eyes watching with eerie silence. Across from him stood an opponent, an Ilari warrior, taller and more muscular than Lyrian, his pale blue skin marked with dark swirling tattoos. Noah didn't know his name, but that hardly mattered. What mattered was that he looked ready to rip Noah apart. Your first trial, a voice boomed from above, it was the matriarch. You must prove your strength against an Ilari warrior. Survive, and you move forward. Noah barely had time to process the words before the warrior lunged. He dodged just in time, the alien's fist narrowly missing his ribs. The force behind the punch was insane. If that had hit him, he would have broken something for sure. Noah scrambled backward, his heart hammering. How the hell was he supposed to win this? He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't some kind of trained fighter. He was just Noah. The warrior came at him again, moving with terrifying speed. This time, Noah couldn't dodge completely. The impact glanced off his shoulder, sending him stumbling. Pain flared through his arm, but he ignored it. Think. This wasn't about brute force. He couldn't overpower his opponent. But maybe he could outsmart him. Noah took a deep breath and changed tactics. Instead of dodging wildly, he began watching his opponent's movements, looking for patterns, openings. The warrior attacked again, but this time, Noah was ready. He sidestepped at the last moment, using the alien's own momentum against him, sending him crashing into the arena wall. A shocked murmur rippled through the crowd. The warrior recovered fast, but now Noah had a strategy. He kept dodging, kept redirecting, never attacking, just letting the alien wear himself down. Minutes passed, and the warrior's movements grew slightly slower, his breathing heavier. Noah saw his chance. As the alien charged one last time, Noah ducked low and swept his leg out in a desperate gamble. The warrior lost his footing, just for a second, but that was all Noah needed. He twisted, using every ounce of strength to shove the warrior forward. The alien tumbled to the ground, landing hard. Silence fell. Then, the matriarch's voice rang out. The first trial is complete. The second challenge, cunning. The second trial was even worse. Noah found himself in a massive labyrinth, its walls shifting and pulsing as if alive. The goal? Simple. Get to the other side before the exit closed. Except the maze was changing. Doors disappeared. Pathways shifted. Creatures lurked in the shadows. Noah had to rely on instinct, memory, and quick thinking. He used small markers, scratching symbols into the walls with a sharp stone, to track his movements. When the ground collapsed beneath him, he caught himself just in time, barely avoiding a pit of writhing creatures. When an illusion tried to trick him into going in circles, he focused on the details, on what felt wrong, until he broke free. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he saw the exit. He sprinted. The walls began to close, sealing off his path. With one last desperate leap, he dove through the narrowing gap. And landed hard on the other side, gasping for breath. The second trial is complete. The third challenge, spirit. Noah barely had time to recover before the final trial began. He stood alone in a vast, empty chamber, the air thick with unseen energy. Then, suddenly, the walls shimmered. And he was no longer alone. Figures appeared before him. People from his past. His mother, standing in the doorway, the disappointment in her eyes when he told her he was leaving Earth. His best friend, shaking his head. You're wasting your life, man. His younger self, staring back at him. Why are you even here? You're not special. You're not a hero. The voices whispered, clawing at his mind. You don't belong. You can't do this. You will fail. Noah clenched his fists, his breath coming in ragged gasps. It wasn't real. It wasn't real. He forced himself to take a step forward. Then another. The whispers grew louder. But Noah kept walking. You are weak. No. You are nothing. Noah's jaw tightened. I am not nothing, he growled. I don't care if I don't belong. I don't care if I'm not special. He took another step. But I'm here. The voices screamed. And then, suddenly, silence. The chamber dissolved, and he was back in the citadel. Lyrian stood before him. The matriarch's voice rang out. The third trial is complete. Noah exhaled. He had survived. But what happened now? He wasn't sure if he was ready to find out. The bond of fate. Noah stood before the gathered Ilari, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. The weight of what he had just endured clung to him like a second skin. His body ached from the trials, his mind was exhausted, and yet, he was still standing. The matriarch regarded him with those piercing silver eyes. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, she nodded once. "You have passed the trials." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some of the Ilari looked skeptical. Others looked curious. Noah exhaled, trying to steady himself. "So, what now?" The matriarch's expression remained unreadable. "Now, we see if the bond you have unknowingly initiated is truly meant to be." Before Noah could respond, Lyrian stepped forward. "Matriarch, with all due respect, he did not choose this bond." Her voice was calm, but there was something beneath it, something tight, like she was holding back. He did not know what his actions meant. "And yet," the matriarch countered, "he has proven himself worthy." Lyrian hesitated. For the first time, Noah saw uncertainty in her eyes. What is she thinking? The matriarch lifted a hand, and an ornate silver bracelet shimmered into existence before her. Intricate symbols pulsed along its surface, glowing softly. "This is the final test," she said. "The binding of the soul. If you are truly meant to be connected, this artifact will react. If it does not, then the bond will break, and you will be free to leave." Noah swallowed hard. "And if it does react?" The matriarch's gaze was unwavering. "Then your fates will be intertwined forever." Silence stretched between them. Noah looked at Lyrian. She was watching him carefully, her expression unreadable. He took a deep breath. "Okay." The bracelet floated toward him, hovering just above his wrist. Noah hesitated only a second before reaching out. The moment his fingers touched the metal, the world exploded in light. The choice that changed everything. Noah felt something pull at him, like invisible threads wrapping around his very being. Memories that weren't his flickered through his mind. A young Ilari girl, standing alone in a vast golden field, staring up at the sky with wonder. An older woman, her mother, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder, whispering words of wisdom. A battle, flames rising high, the air thick with smoke and grief. Pain. Loss. Duty. Lyrian's memories. Noah gasped, his knees nearly buckling. Across from him, Lyrian clutched her head, eyes wide with shock. She's seeing my memories too, he realized. His childhood on Earth. The nights he spent staring at the stars, wondering if he would ever be more than just ordinary. His decision to leave everything behind, to chase something greater, only to end up here, in a situation he never could have predicted. The connection between them burned bright, raw and undeniable. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the energy dissipated. Noah stumbled back, panting. Lyrian's hands trembled at her sides. The bracelet, still on his wrist, was glowing. The matriarch's voice was calm, but there was an edge of finality to it. The bond is sealed. Noah's mind raced. This wasn't just some symbolic gesture. He felt it, something deep within him had shifted. He looked at Lyrian, searching for any sign of what she was thinking. Her expression was unreadable. But in her eyes, he saw something he hadn't expected. Not anger. Not fear. Something else. Acceptance. The weight of destiny. The days that followed were a blur. Noah was no longer a stranger among the Ilari. He wasn't entirely one of them, but he wasn't an outsider either. Everywhere he went, people watched him with curiosity. Whispers followed him. The bonded human. The one who passed the trials. What does this mean for the Ilari? Noah had no answers. Lyrian, for her part, remained distant. She wasn't cold, but she was reserved. One evening, he found her standing on the balcony of the citadel, staring out at the twin moons above. "So," he said, stepping beside her, "I guess we're stuck with each other now." Lyrian's lips twitched, almost a smile. "It seems that way." Noah exhaled, leaning against the railing. "What happens next?" She hesitated, then spoke carefully. "The bond is not just tradition, Noah. It is a merging of fates. I do not know what that means for us yet. But it means something." Noah nodded slowly. They stood in silence for a long moment. Finally, Lyrian glanced at him, her silver eyes unreadable. "Do you regret it?" He thought about it. Really thought about it. And then, he shook his head. "No," he said. "I don't." Lyrian didn't say anything. But this time, when she looked at him, she didn't look away. A choice beyond fate. Noah stood at the edge of the grand balcony, looking down at the city of Aelthur as it glowed beneath the twin moons. The Ilari had accepted him, at least, most of them had. There were still whispers, still eyes that followed him with suspicion. But that wasn't what weighed on his mind. It was her. Lyrian. The bond between them was real, he could feel it, like a pulse beneath his skin. And yet, she remained distant. Polite, but guarded. Tonight, that distance felt unbearable. He turned as she approached, her silver eyes unreadable in the moonlight. "I heard the council met today," he said. Lyrian nodded. "They did. And?" She hesitated. "They are divided." Noah exhaled. "Because of me." Lyrian shook her head. "Because of what we are now." The weight of those words settled between them. "What does that mean, Lyrian?" Noah asked. She looked at him, and for the first time in days, she let her guard slip. "It means we have a choice." The council's ultimatum. Earlier that day, the High Council of the Ilari had gathered. The bond between Noah and Lyrian was unprecedented. Never before had a human and an Ilari been linked in such a way. This connection could be a strength, one of the elders had said. Or a weakness, another countered. The prophecy speaks of a union that will change our fate. But is this the union we were meant to see? In the end, the council had come to a decision. Noah and Lyrian had to prove what their bond meant. They had to decide what they were to each other. Not just for themselves. For the future of the Ilari. What is real? Noah sat on the balcony railing, watching Lyrian carefully. "So that's it?" he asked. "We have to prove something we don't even understand ourselves." Lyrian sighed. "I told you before, the bond is more than a tradition. It means something. But do you know what it means?" Her gaze flickered. "No." Noah leaned forward. "Then what do you want, Lyrian?" She didn't answer immediately. Finally, she spoke, her voice softer than before. "For so long, I have lived for my people. For duty. For responsibility." She turned to him, silver eyes meeting his. "But when we were connected, I saw your memories. I saw how you searched for something more." Noah nodded slowly. Lyrian exhaled. "Perhaps that is what I want too." Silence stretched between them. Then, cautiously, Noah reached out, just a small movement. Lyrian hesitated, but then, she reached back. Their fingers brushed. This time, there was no surge of overwhelming energy. No visions. No force pulling them together. Just warmth. Just them. And for the first time since all of this began, Noah understood. This bond wasn't about fate. It was about choice. And he was choosing her. Lyrian's fingers tightened around his. And she was choosing him too.